The war in Ukraine has entered a deeply consequential stage, one where military escalation and diplomatic maneuvering are unfolding at the same time. While fighting continues across multiple fronts, a parallel struggle is taking place behind closed doors, where the future of the conflict may be shaped. In recent weeks, Russia has intensified its campaign against Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Power plants, electrical substations, fuel depots, and transmission networks have increasingly come under attack. These strikes are not random. They represent a deliberate shift in strategy, one aimed at weakening Ukraine not only on the battlefield but across society as a whole. Energy infrastructure forms the backbone of modern life. Electricity powers hospitals, communication systems, water treatment facilities, transportation networks, and military coordination. By targeting these systems, analysts say Russia is attempting to create sustained pressure on both the Ukrainian government and its population. Ukrainian officials report widespread disruptions, particularly in regions already under strain. Blackouts have affected urban centers as well as rural communities. Emergency services have been forced to rely on backup generators. Repair crews continue working under difficult conditions, often while attacks are still ongoing. Despite the scale of the damage, Ukraine has demonstrated a high level of resilience. International partners have supplied transformers, generators, and technical expertise. Rapid repair efforts have restored partial functionality in many areas. Still, the long-term challenge remains significant. At the same time, diplomatic signals are becoming more visible. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has suggested that the coming months could be decisive. In recent remarks, he hinted that mid-year, particularly the month of June, may represent a critical window for potential diplomatic movement. While no formal peace deadline has been declared, the implication is clear. Political calculations are accelerating. For Ukraine, timing matters. Western military aid packages, economic assistance, and political support are all subject to review cycles. Elections in key partner countries may also affect future commitments. Kiev is keenly aware that sustaining momentum now could shape negotiations later. For Russia, for its part, it has maintained that any peace talks must reflect what it describes as realities on the ground. This phrase has become a central feature of Moscow's messaging. Analysts interpret it as an attempt to consolidate leverage through continued military and infrastructural pressure before meaningful negotiations begin. From Moscow's perspective, energy strikes serve multiple purposes. They strain Ukraine's economy, complicate logistics, and increase the cost of continued resistance. At the same time, they send a message to Ukraine's allies about the limits of external support. NATO and Western governments find themselves navigating a narrow path. On one hand, they emphasize support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. On the other, they are cautious about actions that could trigger a broader confrontation between nuclear-armed powers. Western officials continue to stress that their assistance is defensive in nature. However, debates within alliance countries are intensifying, particularly around the sustainability of long-term support and the risks of escalation. Behind the scenes, diplomatic channels remain active. Multiple sources confirm that indirect communication between Russia and Ukraine has never fully stopped. Intermediaries, regional actors, and international organizations are reportedly facilitating quiet discussions aimed at de-escalation. These efforts are not always visible, but they form a critical part of the conflict's trajectory. The war's impact extends far beyond Ukraine's borders. Energy instability has had ripple effects across Europe. Supply disruptions, infrastructure risks, and market uncertainty have influenced energy prices and policy decisions. Governments are under pressure to balance public concerns with geopolitical commitments. In international politics, this interconnectedness creates what analysts call a domino effect. A conflict that begins in one region can quickly influence economic stability, political alignments, and security calculations elsewhere. Experts warn that continued infrastructure warfare increases the risk of unintended escalation. Miscalculations, whether through misinterpreted signals or technical failures, could draw additional actors into the conflict. The question of peace remains complex. Any potential settlement would likely involve multiple stages. Analysts suggest that initial ceasefires could be limited in scope, followed by monitored disengagement zones and long-term security guarantees. Even under optimistic scenarios, rebuilding trust would take years. For Ukraine, peace must address security concerns and sovereignty. For Russia, negotiations are tied to strategic positioning and influence. For the international community, stability is the primary goal, but achieving it will require careful balance. As the conflict continues, energy systems remain a key indicator. Future strikes, repair efforts, and infrastructure resilience will signal whether escalation is intensifying or restraint is emerging. Diplomatic activity will also provide clues. High-level meetings, shifts in rhetoric, and changes in military posture will all be closely analyzed in the coming weeks. For now, the war remains unresolved. Military operations persist, diplomacy advances quietly, and the months ahead may determine whether the conflict moves towards negotiation or enters an even more dangerous phase. The outcome will not only shape Ukraine's future, but will also influence global security for years to come.